Just wanted to note that this program today, you're here to learn about intergenerational trauma. Please note that this program is being recorded. By entering, you are consenting to your likeness possibly appearing in the promotional materials of the Los Angeles Public Library. If you do not wish to have your likeness appear in the recording, please keep your videos or sound off. During the presentation, the video and sound will be disabled, but we will enable both features during the Q&A session. So yes, and so just to start again, my name is Lynn Nguyen and I'm the Young Adult Librarian at the Chinatown Branch Library with the Los Angeles Public Library. I'm here today to welcome you to today's Big Read program with special guests Stacey Dubois and Yen Sao as they talk about intergenerational trauma and how it has impacted Asian American refugees. We recognize and acknowledge the first people of this land, honor their elders, past and present, and the descendants who are citizens of these nations. For more information on which territory you may reside on, check out native-land.ca. We would like to recognize the ongoing refugee. We would also like to recognize the ongoing refugee crisis. For more information, check out rescue.org/topic/refugee-crisis. We'd like to thank the National Endowment for the Arts Big Read, a partnership with the Midwest, Department of Cultural Affairs, the National Endowment for Humanities, and the Lenore S and Bernard A. Greenberg Fund, the program foundation, and the behind the scenes staff for helping bring this program to you virtually. In addition, let me spotlight my photo. In addition, we'd like to thank the Friends of the Chinatown Library for their supporting the Big Read program series. If you would like to see more amazing programs, please visit our online calendar at lapl.org/events. Our website also has blog posts and video links that highlight the library's diverse resources and upcoming programs. Participants at today's program will have a chance to win a free copy of The Best We Could Do. Please email bigread@lapl.org to receive the link to the survey to be entered into the opportunity drawing to win a free copy of The Best We Could Do. Here we go. And of course, you can also scan the QR code that's going to pop up on the screen right now. So you use your phone, camera, and then you can scan that QR code. So if during this program you're finding that you're having a difficult time, please contact the Los Angeles County Helpline at 1-800-854-7771. Again, that's 1-800-854-7771. The helpline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And now on to today's program. Stacey Dubois is a licensed clinical social worker with a master's from Columbia University School of Social Work. She has worked in the mental health field for the past 16 years and is dedicated to mental health awareness, suicide prevention, and integrated behavioral health care. She is also a mother of 3 children, an immigrant to the US at a young age, and passionate about individuals having a strong cultural awareness and ownership of their cultural background while living in the US. Yen Sao here is a wife, mother, and social worker. She was born in Vietnam and immigrated to the US in 1993. She has high hopes that mental health will not be a taboo subject within the Asian American community and that we can live in a world where kindness is the norm. So now let's welcome to the virtual library stage, Stacey Dubois and Yen Sao. Hi, Stacey. Hi. Oh, here we go. Welcome to today's program. We're just so excited to have you close out our Big Read program series because you know, the Vietnam War and the ongoing refugee crisis is so you know, it's something that happens in most of our lives, especially when your parents and grandparents immigrate here from another country without, you know, having that choice just to survive. So I hope that you can shed some light on this topic for all of us to, you know, help us better understand our families, our parents, and, you know, anyone that may be going through this type of experience of being a refugee themselves. So thank you for being here. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen.
Now go ahead and jump in, Lynn. Thank you very much for inviting both Yen and I to join you today. We want to thank the LA Public Library for giving us this opportunity because you know, it's such an important topic, and we want to be able to bring that education awareness and the space for our community here. So for the library to bring it, include it in their program, I'm just very delighted to be a part of this, and I'm sure Yan as well. I also wanted to recognize that, May, even though it's coming to an end, is a month where we honor Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, as well as Mental Health Awareness Month. So this is the perfect topic to cover this time. I also want, as we will be exploring an intergenerational trauma that has been weaved throughout the book of The Best We Could Do, I do also want to reckon, even though our topic is mostly about the Vietnamese boat people, I do want to recognize that there are others who have also experienced trauma and intergenerational trauma, and we want to hold space for that as well. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick overview of what we're going to talk about, but we do want to also make sure that in addition to education about this topic and having a discussion about it, that we also provide you some resources at the end, so that will be provided as well. Next slide.
Just some reminders. Everyone's experience is different and will be respected. We're going to be talking about trauma and intergenerational trauma in the context of the experiences in the book. We're going to share a lot of stories, some personal experiences. We just want everyone to be advised that, their experiences are different, but will be respected. We also hope that, this program brings you some comfort, and always remember that there's hope.
So we thought that it would be important for both Yan and I to kind of share with you what our connection is to the Vietnamese boat people. And I can start out by sharing that my family came to the US. They had to leave Vietnam, their homeland, in around end of 1978, 79, with my brothers, who were 3 and 1 at that time. They got into a boat that sought refuge in Malaysia. They were one of 3 boats that left at that time, one to Malaysia, one to Cambodia, and one to Thailand. And from what my dad shared with me, he said that, they found out that the boat to Cambodia didn't quite make it due to pirating and other stuff at sea. But so our family, went to Malaysia to seek refuge, and the picture we have here is just one of many examples of boats that left their country to kind of seek refuge. And my dad shared that, it was the same, very small boats with a lot of people. And, just thinking about like my parents and family going through that at such a young age, it's definitely something that has always stuck with me. For me, when I was actually born in the refugee camp in Malaysia, and we came over to the US when I was only 2 weeks old. So while I don't have memories, of their journey over, I definitely have heard stories from my parents, and as we've grown up, heard different things about how that journey had impacted them.
Thank you, Stacey. I had my story is kind of similar but different. My oldest brother actually was one of the boat people. He came with my grandma and my uncles and aunts. I hear bits and pieces of stories because it's still a topic that my family's not comfortable discussing. I think from my dad at that time, there are stories about him being incarcerated somehow. My mom and dad having to decide, to whether or not to bring the whole family over at once, or, they decided to kind of not take that risk and have my brother go over. And in the event that the boat really doesn't make it over, and I can't imagine like being a mom now having to make that decision to separate your child from your family. My brother said he was about 9 or 10, and same as Stacey, they landed on a small island in Malaysia, eventually made it to the Philippines, and then finally settled in California. I think on their way to the Philippines, I was born. I don't know, he didn't have the timeline, but they did sponsor the rest of the family over in 93. And I think just remembering like the shock of being in California. I came over wearing this, there's a picture of me in this like white dress that looked like I was going to my own wedding. My hair's curly, and it's just like, while going to school, you know, the teachers aren't allowed to hit you. They can't force you to do anything. It's just like, I'm in the American dream, but I can't imagine what my brother and my aunts and uncle had to go through to build that up for us. So it's definitely a humbling experience having them share these stories with me.
So, before we get into the topic of intergenerational trauma, we actually thought that it'd be important to set some foundation. And, you know, we recognize that within the Asian American communities, mental health is actually a topic that is highly stigmatized, not mentioned a lot. And as Yen mentioned earlier, you know, we sometimes our families won't share these stories of what they went through with us. I recall that I only found out, you know, an in-depth story about our journey over maybe within the last 5 years. And my family has been here over 40 years. So what, you know, I wanted to touch on about mental health. And like I mentioned earlier, mental health awareness is for the month of May. And so it's, you know, important to recognize that that is an equally important part of our being. Not just our physical health, but our mental health has to be taken care of as well in order for us to feel good about ourselves, be, you know, functioning, be happy. And so I wanted to really define, make a distinction between mental health versus mental illness. So for mental health, it refers to our emotional state, our social well-being, and how we feel about ourselves and how we interact with others, right? So, you know, if you feel good and you have, you feel good about yourself, you're positive, you're feel like you're living a good life, then, you know, that refers to your good mental health that you have. A lot of people hear about mental illness, and that, well, actually, let me take that back. We might hear about mental illness in a negative context in terms of like, oh, that person's crazy, that person's having mood swings. Mental illness refers to a range of disorders that affects our mood, our thinking, and our behavior. And people who have mental illness, they experience distress, they experience problems functioning in home, in social situations at work. And so there is a distinction between your mental health and mental illness. Next slide, please.
I also think it's important to highlight those distinctions, because even within my family, whenever I talk to my mom about taking care of my own mental health, and you know, the first question is like, are you depressed? Do you need to go see a psychiatrist? It's like, no, Mom, I actually just have to take care of myself.
And actually, I want to add back in there, yes, you know, that is a taboo sometimes, but, you know, an important thing to keep in mind is that, you know, just like we take care of our physical health, you know, if you have diabetes, you're gonna do what the doctor says, take some medication to try to stabilize it. When we're not feeling good in our mood, we want to take care of that so that we can stabilize. Sometimes seeking mental health treatment, whether professional ones, whether with a therapist, a counselor, a psychologist, psychiatrist, all of that can help you address your mental health issues and kind of help you stabilize again. Not all treatment requires medication. Sometimes, depending on everyone's situation, an individual situation, you might require both medication and therapy. Sometimes it just means that you need therapy to learn the coping skills to help you stabilize again.
Right. Oh, sorry. Len, can you go back to the trauma slide? Thank you. We're going to be talking a lot about trauma in relations to the book and in relations to the topic today. What is trauma? So trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event. The Webster Dictionary defines it as resulting from severe mental or emotional stress. It varies, the symptoms varies from individual to individual. And some examples of when trauma occurs, like we see it in like physical abuse, sexual abuse, grief, intimate partner violence, bullying, more recently, like community violence, such as like the rise of Asian hate crimes, natural disasters. It could be immediately after the event or the shock, and shock and denial are typical. I think one of the when I was reading the book, what stood out was towards the end when the family, they had talked about, finally settling into California. And one night they hear someone say, get upstairs. And automatically, the response was to like lock the doors and hide and grabbing all of their important documents, not even knowing what really happened outside. That's just like their instinct, right? It just turns out, a neighbor had fallen asleep with a lit cigarette and there was a fire. And I liked how like she termed this reaction as the refugee reflex, but it's more of the long-term trauma, right? The reaction, it's like the unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, strained relationships, even physical symptoms. Trauma can manifest in physical symptoms like nausea, headaches. I remember, even at a young age when I remember going to school in Vietnam and, not napping can result in like physical punishment of you getting hit in the hand. And the idea of like forgetting to do my homework in California made me physically sick. And that's how trauma can manifest. Thank you. And I think it's important to also note the signs and symptoms of trauma. These feelings may be triggered by something environmental, and it can manifest in different ways and varies from survivors to survivals. I think we just highlighted some common symptoms of trauma. There are other signs and symptoms. One is feeling overwhelmed. They find themselves in a situation that triggers a traumatic memory, and that memory in turn dominates their thinking. So just imagine like finding yourself fixated on this feeling or thought of like a traumatic memories. And that feeling just prohibits you from carrying on or completing your task, right? Some survivors may experience sudden panic attacks from feeling overwhelmed. If you're experiencing this, people may see you as like frequently flustered, chronically anxious. Another symptom that we might see is mood swings, which is like a sudden or dramatic shift in mood. Traumatic memories or sensations can arise without warning. So it kind of triggers your fight, flight, or freeze. And it's oftentimes it's kind of without warning. Taking back like when in the book, it talked a lot about, flashbacks and references, and those flashbacks can actually cause mood swings. Emotional numbing or disassociation with events and or feelings associated with events. This could be seen as kind of like a self-protection, your brain kind of protecting yourself from reliving that trauma. But it can seem to others as like avoidance, right? When they ask you like, what's wrong? Most of the answers like, I don't know, I don't want to talk about it. Or, some people actually really forget, they really do kind of disassociate themselves with that event. Poor decision-making when someone experiences like a disturbing situation, they might lack cognitive clarity to make the right decisions or sound decisions in regards to like your career, relationship, goals. It might be impaired. You might not have the ability to manage stress effectively. And I think, trauma survivors long-term, they tend to use like maladaptive coping strategies, avoidance, self-blame, substance use, to cope with distressing memories of their traumatic experience. And, while these strategies work short-term, long-term wise, it can cause like worsening mental health symptoms. slide.
So right now we're going to talk about what intergenerational trauma means. The American Psychological Association, APA, describes it as, or defines it as, a phenomenon in which descendants of a person who has experienced a terrifying event shows adverse emotional and behavioral reactions to the event that are similar to those of a person himself or herself. So what might that look like is, the effects of trauma on the survivors impact the relationships in the next generation who continue processing the trauma that their parents experience. Refugee children who maybe had never experienced the trauma firsthand, can end up internalizing their parents' psychological distress. And in the book, the author wrote, "What becomes of us after we die? Do we live on in what we leave to our children?" And that, I think really encompasses what intergenerational trauma is. Next slide, please. So here is a list of common symptoms of people who experience intergenerational trauma. And there's a lot of them here. Depression, helplessness, lack of trust, irritability, anger, guilt. And so these are, some of the symptoms that Yen already mentioned earlier in trauma. They also overlap with people who experience depression and anxiety overall, who end up developing mental health issues or mental illness. And as Yen mentioned earlier, it does vary from individual to individual. Within our own family and my siblings, I've seen firsthand that the experience my brother has varies from what I went through. Even though he says that he doesn't remember his journey over from Vietnam to Malaysia to the US, I can see that his experience as he's growing up and how he's viewing the world is very different from how I am experiencing it. And I think what happens, the reason for that is there's different factors in how people are affected. Their age order, when they came to the United States, how their journey was when they came over, and then also how they assimilated or acculturated to the American culture. So we're gonna take a deeper dive into what intergenerational trauma might look like. And we broke it down into different sections. And so, in terms of how it might potentially look for refugees, our parents, and some of our siblings who came over, and this is what we also see throughout the book as well. They may have PTSD, there may be, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's a response to when you're in a very traumatic experience, and that speaks to kind of like what Ian mentioned earlier about how the family reacted to the fire that happened next door. There may be alcoholism use, substance abuse, hypervigilance, having a stress reaction when something happens around them that might make them react quickly and want to flee. They might have experienced, imprisonment because of the war, some torture, definitely loss of property as they had to, only grab what they could to come over, malnutrition, physical assault, loss of their livelihood. Some of our families and parents had, a good career going on, or maybe they were, seeking education that didn't quite transfer over to the US when they came over, and it was an honor, so they had to start all over again. So, these are some examples of what it might look for our refugee parents or families. This is not an inclusive list, obviously, but what we imagine and what we saw throughout the book.
Another good topic is how might it look for immigrant children? I've experienced it being one of them, but there was a lot of pressure and mental health, but like lack of mental health, the pressure of like having already made it to America and, the pressure to strive for the American dream, right? Getting those straight A's, making it to the top college, getting a good career, being a doctor, a lawyer, anything that makes your parents proud, right? The invalidation of having no right to complain. So, you've already made that journey here. You're the selective ones who've made it. You have no right to complain about what happens moving forward. And that brings you back to like having no right to talk about mental health, to take care of yourself in that capacity, because, again, you have this pressure to kind of make your parents proud and, make the people you left back home proud of who you've become. A lot of immigrant children might have grown up without parents or involved parents without any emotional support. In my experience, my parents, when we first came over, they've dedicated, I understood they loved us, but they've dedicated a good portion of their life to kind of build up a better life for us. They've worked hours in, doing cheap labor. They worked in sweatshops. They would go to work at 8 and wouldn't come home till midnight. Oftentimes we would have to go in and help them, cut the threads and make sure that everything's done. And I see a lot of head nods, we probably all have that similar experience. I think some of the good quotes that I found in the book in regards to immigrant children and their feelings is when she said that nothing that happened makes me special, but my life is a gift that is too great a debt I can never repay. It's kind of the overcompensation we feel for having to, thank our parents for bringing us over for the American dream. Like nothing I can do can amount to the sacrifices they made for our children, for ourselves and our future children. And also, the conflicting emotions of not having involved parents present. A good quote that I found was that, she said, we hang resentment onto the things our parents did to us or the things that they didn't do for us, which is very true of my experiences coming here.
And, I want to add to that, that we do, when Yen and I were talking about this, we recognize that it was not that our parents didn't want to connect with us. It was because they were so busy just trying to survive and provide for their family. But at the same time, there may be some parents who had experienced trauma that were it was too much for them, where they would detach and maybe be numb to it. So they, that's where we might have experienced our families not wanting to talk about the journey coming over and reliving those experiences again. And at the same time, if any of their children experience trauma, it might be difficult for the parents to be present for them because it's because they're trying to, I'm sorry, they are dissociating from what had happened to them. And so, they, as much as they love their children, maybe they're just not able to provide that emotional connection needed to help their child get through this, through their own trauma. And so that kind of also, relates to how mental health has always been a difficult topic within the Asian American community. In addition to, having what we all might know as saving our face and not airing out dirty laundry. You know, there was more of an expectation of taking care of the family as a whole versus taking care of your own individual self-being. And so there is, you know, there's research that shows that Asian Americans who who are here, they're less likely to seek treatment. Even though 53% of the Asian American community may experience some mental health issue or illness in their lifetime, only about 20% receive treatment. So, you know, what ends up happening is that a lot of mental health issues are internalized and kept within, and they're not addressed appropriately. Next slide, please.
Do you have anything to add to the intergenerational trauma for immigrant children, Stacey?
I'm sorry?
Do you have anything to add about immigrant children, or should I move on to first generation?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, yeah, that's definitely more I wanted to add. And then also, okay, so the other thing that that I wanted to add was that, you know, there might be, we might minimize how our children may experience their trauma, because when in comparison to what our parents might have gone through, it doesn't, you know, match. It might not seem like it's a big deal, and so sometimes, unfortunately, that's something that immigrant children might experience and struggle with. For example, you know, maybe if a traumatized parent, they are unable to meet their children's their needs.
Right. And then we'll move to how it may impact first generation. I think trauma, if you're not mindful of your trauma and it's not brought to light, it carries on over to the first generation, right? Again, they're going to have these feelings of invalidation, the idea that you have no right to complain. You know, the generation before you made that sacrifice. You basically have everything handed to you on a silver platter. You have no right to complain. And that in turn, you know, doesn't give them a right to kind of focus on their mental health and seeking out help if needed. Immigrant parents might overcompensate, right? Things that they didn't have coming here, or things that they felt like they needed. Toys, entertainment, extracurricular activities, postpartum mental health issues due to like conflicting cultural values. I think that's where kind of the term tiger parenting comes from, right? It's like you have to be super involved because the generation before you was so busy kind of setting the grounds that they weren't as involved. So you want to be part of every game. You want to be part of every performance. It's kind of hard finding that balance between gentle parenting and setting boundaries and not having to overcompensate all the time for things that we felt were lacking while growing up. You know, the difference between like fear and shame-based parenting, right? I remember growing up with parents who worked all the time. My brother basically raised me. And it's like, well, if you don't go to school, we're going to disown you and you're going to live on the streets and be homeless, you know, instead of kind of talking through as to why I didn't feel like going to school that day, what I was scared of going to school that day. I think I think my brothers tried their best in raising me with what they had. But most of the stories were like fear-based, right? If, you know, you were born from a rock, you're not really our sister. So we're just here to take care of you. feeling guilt and shame for not having lived up to those expectations, right? If you're not getting the straight A's, if you're not getting to the most prestigious college, then are you really making your parents proud? And you know, it's all of this, that's like the revolving trauma cycle that everyone kind of filters through from time to time. And I think, you know, all in all, it's kind of a work in progress. We kind of have to be cognizant of the trauma that we have and be mindful to not pass that on to future generations. Do you have anything to add to that, Stacey?
No, I you know, you covered it basically. That's what we have talked about, Yen and I, as we, you know, talked about how we want our children to grow up and not, you know, live through, to have this intergenerational trauma get passed down from generation to generation. And so, you know, this is perfect to go into our next slide. And so what can we do? You know, there is a way to break the cycle, and there's many different ways, steps to doing that. But definitely one thing to understand is that there's a lot of myths out there about mental health, right? And which is why we brought up the topic earlier about the difference between mental health and mental illness, and the need to educate ourselves about that. Also, the need to be open about talking about mental health. This is not something that is common within the Asian American community, but by you know, by each individual taking that step and bringing awareness, talking to family members about it, doing education and educating yourself about it would help you with that. And the second step to that is taking care of yourself. You know, you want to make sure that you're understanding yourself, you're not shaming yourself, giving your compassion to the struggles that you may be going through as an immigrant child or a refugee, and recognizing that it is impacting your mental health. And then also to practice some of that self-care with yourself by seeking help, by talking to other people about it, by basically forming like a support group with each other. The other thing that I think also stops Asian Americans from seeking treatment is, you know, maybe finding it's difficult to find somebody who might understand you. So access to like a culturally competent therapist can be challenging in wherever you may be living. But I think that that's something that hopefully is more accessible now, in particular with telehealth being offered during this pandemic. The access to a culturally competent therapist has been, you know, more available. And you know, that is important because you want to address when you know, recognize that there is mental health issue, you want to address it early on. You want to, you know, get rid of those maladaptive coping behaviors and replace them with ones that will make you feel better. And then the other thing on a larger scale, what I've been seeing is that in the healthcare settings and mental health settings, there has been training around trauma-informed care. And I'm sharing that with you because, you know, I think it's important for this to happen within that medical setting, because it changes the focus of treatment from, you know, what is wrong with you to really asking the question, what happened to you? Let me hear you and let me try to figure out how I can help you out. And so basically, you know, it promotes healing, and it makes the person feel more empowered to take care of their physical and mental health. Next slide. So we want to, definitely leave with you some resources that are available to the Asian American community. If you are in the Los Angeles County area, we've listed 3 clinics that have culturally competent therapists who are from the Asian American background. Asian Pacific Counseling and Treatment Center has a few locations throughout LA County, same with Pacific Clinics. There is, for Pacific Clinics, the Asian Pacific Family Center. That one is specific to Asian Americans, and they are located within the San Gabriel Valley. And then there's also Coastal Asian Pacific Islander Family Mental Health Center that is located in the Gardena area. Also with various, various Asian American staff who speak various languages as well. And then lastly, the helpline, which Lynn mentioned earlier, it is a general LA County helpline that is can connect you to any sort of resources that you might need, whether it is a counselor, a therapist, a psychiatrist. This number is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And lastly, we leave you with this: healing is a choice. It is not an easy one because it takes work to turn around your habit, but keep making the choice and shift will happen.
That's great. Thank you so much. That was so amazing. Jens, Stacey, you guys brought up so many good talking points, and this is just coming from my own personal view as a child of refugees. Both of my parents also immigrated from Vietnam after the Vietnam War, but they met here in America. But it really stuck out to me with Yen's story and your story, Stacey, because my mom, she came from. She after she left the Vietnam War, she's one of the boat people. She got separated from her family and had to go to Indonesia, and then her other side of the family had to go to Thailand, and they were separated for about 8 months. And then it's hard hearing all these stories, because then I'm starting to understand, like, oh, maybe this is why she doesn't really talk about it. Maybe this is why, they don't share too much about the things, because it's really painful. But then growing up, you kind of see them do like these habits and these things, and then you're like, why aren't they doing certain things? So and yeah, so anyways, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing. I think it gives us a better, as a being a second gen Asian American, it kind of gives you a better sense of, like, why your parents do what they do, and why they couldn't talk to you about certain things because they're still dealing with their own trauma. So yeah. Are there any questions out there from the audience? I just wanted to point that out and say thank you for helping me better understand this whole mental health thing, because it's a really hard topic amongst the Asian American community to discuss, because it is a taboo and nobody wants to talk about it. So if there are any questions out there, please do input it in the chat box so we can ask Yen and Stacey. They're here to help us understand what intergenerational trauma is, and they've done such a wonderful job. Any questions at all? We have a comment here. This is your wonderful presentation. Thank you, Anjali. That was, I agree. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, well, those resources are wonderful. And if anybody would like a copy of these slides, please do email bigread@lapl.org so we can send over the PowerPoint slides to you. Also, we have a question here. Shirley asks, what is the best way to approach our parents to open up a discussion about things they are still dealing with? That's a great question.
I mean, personally, I think to just approach it as something you're genuinely interested in, right? Like, hey, like, my mom is a hoarder, and I've always wondered, like, why do you need to keep these receipts from 12 years ago? You can't return these items. Or why do you need to keep a box of my calculator that no longer works? But I think she was hesitant to talk about it, but it was genuinely, I didn't know why she wanted to keep these items. But I think just sitting there and just asking, the whys, the hows, in kind of like a non-judgmental way, you might not get the answer, but it kind of opens up the door for discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely approach it, with curiosity, but also compassion, right? Having compassion for our parents um, to go through this journey and just, say, okay, I didn't travel through it with you, but I can imagine that it was a very hard journey. When you open it up that way, then maybe they will feel like, okay, you wanna hear some more. You're not judging me for why I'm hoarding, because I also have that same issue with my parents as well. But it's just, yeah, approaching it that way, it definitely would help open up our parents more.
That's great advice. Diane here asks, how will you be talking to your children about their family history and intergenerational trauma?
Definitely. I mean, for me, and I think Yen, you and I, we've talked about it before with our kids, is it's just, trying to share with them the journey, right? Want to be open about sharing what our family went through, but also letting them know that these are things that happen to us, but that we don't think that we don't want it to be something that gets passed on to them, that we want to be available for them and to help them through their journey in a healthy way. And what that means for me really is to, like I mentioned earlier, break the cycle, to take care of myself and, go beyond um, the stigma of seeking help. Even though I am within the mental health field, I do, acknowledge that it took me a long time to really understand what mental health was, because it wasn't what I grew up with. I had to learn about it through schooling, through my career, and really what self-care meant. So, and then modeling that to my children later on.
I think definitely modeling it to our children. They see and they feel more than we think and we know. And I think if they see that we're actively working on our trauma, then they will know once they're older that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay. It's also okay to acknowledge that you have trauma. Us as parents, we can't shield them from not ever having trauma. They're going to experience trauma once, twice, more than a couple of times in their life. And we want them to have the ability to deal with it, to know that there's help out there, to talk about it, and to kind of just break through that stigma of internalizing trauma. And I think that's kind of a step forward for everyone.
No, that's great. That's great. Why is it that like, why do you think as children, like, we, even if our parents don't talk about, what they go through, like, but just just having this discussion here, like, I'm starting to feel a little bit of like anxiety, or like starting to feel like I start to tear up, because I think about, oh wow, like my mom went through that, my dad went through that. Like, why is it that we feel these feelings even though we've never gone through it?
That's a good question, Lynn. And that's basically like what intergenerational trauma is, right? Like we're internalizing what our parents cannot or have not been showing, right? They've been keeping it in themselves. We know that they've gone through it. And so we're sort of like living through it, experiencing it for them, or showing those emotions for them. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I think, exploring this topic and putting it together, Yen and I have had to explore it ourselves and really look into how it's impacted our family as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's wonderful. Yeah, just this whole topic altogether, it's like we're still trying to understand it because we're just one generation from everything that happened, So I think as time goes on and as we get more wonderful social workers like yourselves and researchers to explore this topic, like we will definitely, find some type of understanding. But as we're still processing it, it's pretty amazing how it's come to this point. So I'm so glad to have you both here to help us better understand this topic as we're still learning how to explore it. All right. Any other questions? Julie Ping here said, thank you so much for your time. All right. Yes, thank you from Angela. Okay, well, I just want to go ahead and, mention again, if anybody here is interested in the PowerPoint slides, the amazing PowerPoint slides that was put together by Stacey and Yen, please do email bigread@lepl.org and we'll send you a copy of it. You will also have a chance to win a $50 gift card if you email bigread@lepl.org and complete the survey for the best we could do. So the gift card is for the library store, and it's a wonderful place here at the Central Library where you could use it to buy anything you want, from books to gifts. They have everything, and every week it's always something really exciting that they add to the collection. So let me see here. Please join us again next week at 4 p.m. for today at 4 p.m. for the next Big Read program. It's going to be a zine making program that will focus on telling our family stories and the immigration experience. So if you'd like to get the Zoom link for that, please do email bigread@lepl.org and we'll send over the Zoom link. And of course, thank you so much to Yen and Stacey for joining us today for the Big Read program. Don't forget to check out our next Big Read program again. That's going to be today at 4 p.m. And we also do have the summer reading challenge. So if you do, come up to if you go to lepl.org / I believe it's summer of reading, you'll be able to get a chance to sign up for the summer reading program and check out all of lepl.org / summer. You'll be able to check out all of the cool events that is going to be taking place. So yes, until next time, we truly appreciate all of your support. The success of all of our library programs could not happen without viewers like you. So thank you. Oh yes, it's starting the lepl.org / summer reading challenge will be starting on June 6th. So thank you everyone for joining with us today. And thanks to Stacey and Yen. Really appreciate you all. Okay, have a great, thank you.